Have I lost my mind by suggesting that the end of 2022 into 2023 may actually be a good time for some people to purchase a house?
I think it goes without saying.
Possibly, but stick around and hear me out. What is up, internet friends? It's Jeff with Jeff West Properties, your host for the Conroe Living Channel, where we identify and celebrate everything that makes Conroe, Texas, one of the fastest growing cities in America. In this video, I am going to make a case for why it may be a good idea for some people to purchase a home. But before I do that, let's take a look at how we got to the place we are today in the housing market. All right, I'm going to skip over a bunch of details and make this a very Cliff Notes version. It's the cliffiest of notes. So let's start with the fact that for the last decade, America has been undersupplied in housing for the amount of population. So really, for almost a decade, we've seen consistent house appreciation as more and more people get into the housing market with less inventory available. Then 2020 hits, and we all know what happens there. COVID takes over the world, and people are basically sheltering in place for a while. One of the things that people found, say you have a family that's a two-income family and has kids, well, those people were forced to work from home, so you had two people working from home and you had however many kids working on their schoolwork from home. And people realized very quickly that the breakfast table was not a great place to have three offices. So as the world opened back up, people started to reevaluate their living situation. There was a mass exodus to the suburbs where you were able to get more for your money. Now, as well as that, you also had the Fed trying to fight off some of the damage that was done by COVID, and they brought the interest rate down to historic lows. Well, bringing the interest rate down brought new buyers into the pool that otherwise couldn't have afforded it.
It's a great time to buy.
So when that happened, you had even more demand for the limited supply. So as we know with supply and demand, the less supply you have, the more demand you have, the more valuable that commodity becomes. And so houses started to become more valuable. That happens when two people want to buy the same house and they have to fight it out for who's willing to pay the most. So prices started going up really quickly. So if that wasn't enough, enter the institutional investor, the hedge funds. In 2021, hedge funds were responsible for purchasing 25% of all available homes. And so this is what we were now dealing with. Let's say there's a hot new neighborhood that everybody wants to live in, and you decide to put an offer in on a house, and somebody else puts an offer in and they beat you out. Well, you don't get that house. You have to wait for the next one. But the good news is, on that next one, this person's no longer your competition because they already have their house. So with the institutional investors, it didn't work that way because they had billions of dollars to invest in cash. So they bought that house, then they bought the next one, they bought the next one, and so on and so on. I had two listings on the same street over a 4-month period, and the same institutional investor bought both of them. And I found out later they bought 3 other houses on that same street. So when you have all of these people finally in a position to be able to buy a house, but they can't because they keep getting beaten out by the institutional investor, what are they going to do? Well, they have to go back to renting. Well, who are they renting from? Same institutions that just bought everything out from under them. So as a result of that, rent prices also started going through the roof.
Diabolical.
Then the Federal Reserve stepped in and did what they said they were going to do, which is raise the interest rate. They do that to fight off inflation. So when the interest rate was raised, it was basically a brick wall to the housing industry. The hedge funds moved out of the picture, and then those people who were able to afford before could no longer afford it. Which brings us to where we are today. In 2022, homes sold were down 27% from the previous year. And remember, at the beginning of 2022, it was still a hot market. There were still a lot of people buying until those interest rates finally got too high, which really means that the third and fourth quarter of 2022 was a brick wall for the housing industry. Okay, so the reasons are pretty obvious as to why it's not a good time to buy a house right now. But let's put a pros-cons list together just to kind of look at the whole picture. And we'll start with the cons just so we can rip that Band-Aid off. The first con is that the interest rate is ridiculously high. We're sitting at the end of November around 7% for an interest rate for a home. So to look at an example of what that looks like, if you bought a home with a 3% interest rate a couple of years ago, let's say you bought a $400,000 home, you put 20% down, you financed the rest. If you had a 3% interest rate on that house, you would be paying about $1,350 for premium and interest. That same $400,000 house today, if you're financing it at 7% interest, $2,129. So that obviously sucks. But Another con, take the interest rate away, you also are looking at houses that the prices themselves have gotten ridiculously expensive. The average market in America over the last 2 years has gained 40% value. So if you tried to buy a house 2 years ago and weren't able to, that same house today would cost you 40% more. Okay, it's not looking good so far. Obviously, those are two really big reasons that it doesn't make sense to buy right now. And there's a third one that I think probably carries equal weight for people, and that's fear. The fear of the unknown, the fear of what's going to happen in the future. So we had buyers that 2 years ago were sitting on the sidelines, and now they're sitting on the fence. Difference being, when you sit on the sidelines, you want to get into the game, but something's keeping you out. In this case, those cash buyers, those hedge funds, were making it where people couldn't buy houses, so they had to sit on the sidelines. Those same people now are sitting on the fence, meaning I could go either way. Some of them are saying, even if I could buy a house right now, what happens if the market collapses and the house is worth 50% of what I bought it for? A little bit later in the video, I'm going to show you some reasons as to why a lot of experts don't foresee anything like that happening with major price corrections. But there are certainly people who are out there saying it. By the way, a lot of those people who have been saying that the sky is falling have been saying it for the last 5 years. Every year, it's right around the corner, and they haven't gotten it right yet. So I guess the moral of the story is don't make major decisions based on what you hear on YouTube clips. Okay, I can admit that the thought of buying a house right now looks pretty bleak, but this is a pros-cons list, so let's look in the pros column now. We're going to call this a pro, even though it's really more of a reality check. 3% interest rates. They ain't coming back. The prices that the houses were 2 years ago, they're not coming back. It's time to have a memorial service for what we missed out on, because there's nothing we can do about it. Today is a new day. There's an old saying in real estate, the best time to buy a house is last year. Things just continue to get more expensive. That's just how things work. Now, obviously, it's been more drastic in the last couple of years, but we are where we are, like it or not. And here's the thing. It's not just houses that have gotten more expensive, it's housing. If you're renting right now, you know for a fact that rents have also gone through the roof. It's just expensive to live now. That's the new reality that we're living in. But if you're paying rent, the reality is you're paying a mortgage. You're just not paying your own. You're paying your landlord's. Okay, that didn't seem very cheerful for a pros column, but let's get on to the more cheerful stuff now. Another pro is that buyers finally have choice again. In the last couple of years, people have just bought in a panic. They haven't necessarily bought their dream home. They just bought whatever they could because it was so difficult to find available housing. I was working with a family in 2021, and literally between verbal and official offers, I probably put over 50 offers in for them. Every time a new house hit the market, they told me to write something up before they'd even seen it. Now, fast forward to now, and today's buyers actually have choice again. They could look at 3, 4, 5 houses that they like, and they could take some time to compare and contrast them and decide which one makes most sense for their family. We haven't been able to do that in a long time. It makes working with buyers a lot more fun than it has been over the last couple of years. Okay, here's a final pro that a lot of people don't know about, but it's become a very popular way to deal with the current housing market. And that is a program called the 2-1 buy down program. In essence, you can pay to buy down your interest rate. So you pay a certain amount of money, and instead of having a 7% interest rate in the first year, it goes down to 5%. And then it goes up to 6% the following year, then goes into what you locked into in year 3. So taking the example from earlier, if you're buying a $400,000 home at 7% interest, your principal and interest would be $2,129. But if you buy it down to 5%, your payment is now $1,718, which is a $411 difference. That's pretty substantial. The reason that the 2-1 buy down is so popular is that people in the real estate industry, for the most part, believe that 3 years from now, the interest rate is going to come back down. So you give yourself 2 years of relief, and then 3 years from now, you just refinance at a different interest rate. And the great thing about this environment is because sellers don't have the same leverage they used to and buyers actually do, we can actually negotiate that the seller pay for the cost of the buy down. Hey, if you're getting something out of this video, if you find it valuable, I would really appreciate it if you'd click that like button. Every time you do that, it boosts the visibility of a video. It also boosts my ego, and I'm very fragile, so I could use all the love I could get. Okay, now we're at the best part of the video if you are actually considering buying a home. There are great opportunities to be had if you buy a home straight from the builder right now. For this conversation, there's two types of homes. There are existing homes where somebody lives in it, somebody owns it, they're reselling it. And then there are new build homes where the builder builds it and you're the first person to live in it. Now, this is where I explain why I don't think the market is going to have a downturn like some people are thinking it will. So what we're seeing is that people who own their own homes today, they're just not selling. Some people would look at the data and say that there's a lot more houses on the market now than there was a year ago. And though that's true, it's a little bit misleading. Part of the reason it looks like there's more houses on the market was because a year ago, everything was in multiple offers, and if you blinked, the house was off of the market. Every house that I sold as a listing agent between 2020 up until today had multiple offers on it. And most of the time it had multiple offers. I had as many as 37 on one house. So when that happens, which was happening all the time, I would just put a note that we had a deadline to submit offers and it had to be the highest and best because we had multiple offers on the property already. So we selected the best offer every time between the third and fourth day on the market. So that's how long it stayed on. And that was indicative of what was going on in the market as a whole. So yes, we do have more houses on the market than we did a year ago, but it seems like it's a lot more because they're actually sitting on the market now, where last year they weren't. What we're finding in market data is that there are a lot of people who are putting their houses on the market just to test the market. They're seeing if they can get the price that it's valued at, and if they don't, they just take it off the market. According to MLS data, in November of 2021, so right about a year ago, in the greater Houston area, there were 512 terminated listings, which means somebody put the house on the market and then they took it back off the market. So as of this month, and we're not to the end of the month yet, we already have 922, so we're almost double the terminated listings we had last year. In most cases, it doesn't make a lot of sense for sellers to sell because they have a cheap mortgage compared to what we have today, and they have more than likely a 3% interest rate because most people refinanced when it got low. So even if they got top dollar for their house, they're going to have to pay top dollar for the next house, and they're probably going to have a 7% interest rate on top of it. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for people to sell.
Nope.
So with that being the case, it means that inventory is going to continue to stay low. And as far as supply and demand goes, as long as there's not a lot of supply, you're not going to have a big dip in the values of existing homes. But here's where it gets interesting. Enter the home builder. So in the last few years, new home builders could not keep up with the demand. The market was so hot, obviously people had multiple offers on resale, so builders were trying to build as much as they could to handle that demand. Unfortunately, as most of us know, in the last couple of years, supply chain issues have been a huge problem. It's created shortages, it's created delays for a lot of different industries, and the building industry was definitely hit by that. So the builders had deadlines to try to meet a certain amount of houses being built, and they had to postpone all of them while they were dealing with supply issues. And they were working as hard as they could to get caught up, and unfortunately, by the time they caught up, that's when interest rates rose and the buyers were gone. So when there became a shortage of buyers, the resale home, the people who own their own homes, they just kept doing what they were doing. But builders didn't have that luxury. They're not in the business of holding properties, they're in the business of building properties for people to buy. So unfortunately, the builders just got caught up in bad timing. They have all this inventory to meet the demand that's no longer there. So according to the National Association of Home Builders Builder Confidence Report, builder confidence is at a low that we have not seen since May of 2020. So part of what that means is that a lot of the plans that builders had for the future, they're just putting on hold right now. A lot of new communities are just going to have some dirt lots sitting for a while. So what happens with all the inventory that the builders are now holding? They're not in the business of holding property, so they've got to sell them. And they may not like me saying this, but it is just a reality. Builders are getting desperate. Builders over the last couple of months have been giving incentives that we have never seen before. The first thing they did was they started, and I'm just going to take you behind the veil of the real estate industry, they started giving more bonuses and more commission to agents to actually bring more people in, hoping that that would stop the bleeding. It didn't. So the next thing they started doing was offering these historic incentives that they have never offered before. I saw recently a $30,000 seller's credit to be used for whatever the buyer wanted, whether it's to use that 2-1 buy down program or it's to go towards their own closing costs. But these are things we have not been seeing before. So you may be asking the question, why did the builders give these incentives instead of just dropping the price $30,000? Here's the reason. They're already giving up a lot because they're desperate. But if they were to drop the price, they're not only hurting that house they're selling, they're hurting the houses that they're selling in the future as well. Because this now became the new comp, and the next time they sell a house, that is the price they're going to have to sell it at, or somewhere close to that. So they're trying to do everything possible to avoid dropping prices on houses. However, we've reached a certain point of desperation where, among all the other things, all these great incentives, builders are now also dropping the prices of their homes. So what does that mean to you? If you're considering buying a house, it is a great time to buy directly from the builder. Between the incentives and some of the price drops you may be able to have, there's good value to be had in buying a new home right now. Now here's the thing. Builders have goals to sell a certain amount of houses before the end of the fiscal year. We're sitting at the end of November now. Most builders' end of fiscal year is the end of the calendar year, December 31st, and they're trying to sell all these houses before the end of December. Will we still see these same incentives in the beginning of 2023? I think we will. I think we'll see some incentives, maybe not what we're seeing now with the builders just trying to get their existing inventory off the books. But I don't see it slowing down that much anytime soon. And I think there's still going to be some good opportunities in 2023 to buy directly from the builders. So to get back to the original question, is now a good time to buy? My answer is maybe. It depends on your situation. I'm not only a realtor, I'm also a real estate investor. And if I were buying a property to flip, if I were buying a property to hold on to, purely as an investment, I would say, no, it's not a great time to buy right now. However, if you're looking for a house for yourself, for your family to live in, depending on the market, I would say, yes, it can be a good time to buy. As an investment, it's not going to make a lot of money right now, just with the way things are financially. But it's not just an investment for you. It's your shelter, and it's a necessity, right? We buy cars because we have to get around. We know those cars are going to depreciate, but we buy them anyway because we need them, and we need shelter. Now, if you are thinking of buying, there's two questions that you need to answer before I could tell you whether it's a good idea or not. The first question is, can you afford to buy this house, to pay for this house at its current 7% interest rate? I always tell people, plan for the worst case scenario, even though it's more than likely not going to happen. We believe 3 years from now the interest rate's going to come down, so you'll never have to reach that maximum payment. But we don't know. None of us are Nostradamus. It could stay at that same level, and you have to be prepared for that. So don't bite off more than you can chew. The second question is, how long do you plan to live there? Because we are more than likely not going to see the appreciation that normally comes year after year with housing because of the boom that we've had over the last couple of years, you stand to lose money if you don't stay in for a certain amount of time. According to the latest survey from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, their prediction is that in 2023 nationally, the housing market is going to lose 1 to 2% of its value. I will say that some markets are more volatile than others. I'm looking at you, Boise, Idaho, Phoenix, Arizona, and unfortunately, Austin, Texas. Those are cities that rose in appreciation above the rest of the national average as they were hot spots during the pandemic. They're more in danger of correction, and we're already starting to see that in those markets. But for a market like Conroe, Texas, that pretty much looks to fall right in line with where Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac see it going. So if that prediction is true, and you have to sell that house within a year or two, you're going to lose money. You're going to lose money from the closing costs on both sides. And if that's going to be the case, you're better off continuing to rent. Okay, after laying all of that out, on a scale of 1 to 1 flew over the cuckoo's nest, how crazy do you think my take is? Let me know in the comments. Now, this video is a basic argument for who may be in a good position to buy a house right now and who shouldn't. But the reality is everybody's situation is unique. Every family situation is different. So if you're really thinking about the possibility of moving, my suggestion is pick up the phone, give me a call, send me an email, shoot me a text, introduce yourself, let me know what you've got going on, and I would love to talk with you, sit down with you, and let you know my opinion on whether it's the right move right now. Whether you're thinking of moving to Conroe, Texas, or anywhere else, I'd be happy to help. Speaking of Conroe, Texas, if you are interested in learning about one of the fastest growing cities in America and what is making that city grow, make sure to subscribe to the Conroe Living Channel. There's tons of videos on there that explain the DNA of the city. Videos like this one.